that I had a chance to speak with you yesterday, and I sensed a strong commitment that you make that I have to making sure that our children, boys and girls, have a chance to be with their families and their dads. I learned a lot about what I learned about the outdoors from my dad and the opportunity to go out, and I know that that's a strong presence in your brain, and I'm delighted that you're here today and gentlemen's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you know, we work hard during these pens, and I think all of us, regardless of which party we're in, see what we perceive to be injustices, and those things fuel our fire, if you will, and are the things that make us work that hard to try to correct those things. I'd first like to thank Mr. Bishop and Mr. Young for attempting to work through this. They have been very helpful. I am not opposed to their piece of legislation. But I'm a dad. My son's name's Wells. I have pictures of him right here when he was in a car seat. He's about to be 16 now. Because of what has been done in the Gulf of Mexico, they've reduced the number of days. In 2007, it was 194 until the current segment that we have now. I have not, simply because it hasn't worked in my schedule, been allowed to take my kid fishing, literally, for red snapper. I asked a friend of mine the other day to please, when he went this year, to take my kid because of what the federal government has done in absolutely eliminating our right to fish for red snapper in the Gulf of Mexico. And I want to make it clear, Mr. Sessions, to people who are watching, we don't get to pick the 10 days. They pick the 10 days, and if it doesn't match your schedule, you're just out of luck. And so the idea that the commercial fishermen can fish year-round, I support that industry. They are my friends. I have commercial fishermen that I fish with on a recreational basis, and I don't want to do anything at all to hurt or to take away from those guys. But what has happened here is the American citizen, the man and the woman and the kid who just want to go out there and catch a red snapper or two, have had their rights to fish in public waters for a public fish taken away from them. We've asked for, and what Mr. Garrett has worked on and the states have worked on, the state's right to set the recreational seasons, the bag limits and other things. Now, some people say, well, the states won't do it right. I would respectfully submit that as somebody who has hunted and fished around the country, when I apply for an elk tag or a deer tag in Colorado, if they've had a disease or if they've had a harsh winter, I expect that the Colorado Department is going to reduce the number of tags that they hand out. Same thing with Wyoming or Kansas or any other state that you may hunt in. The states do the same thing. The bag limit for trout in Florida is not the same on the Atlantic coast as it is in the Gulf. That's because the states know the science better and they understand the fishery better of their particular state and their particular area than the federal government. And what works for one doesn't necessarily work for all. A couple of things were said about poundages. There are two key things where, and I think the gentleman from California probably, if you weren't from the Gulf area, you wouldn't know this in most cases. So the other thing that the council did is they applied a 20% buffer to the recreational anglers. So they took 20% of our season from us just arbitrarily. They just said, we're going to give you X numbers of pounds, but we're going to reduce it by 20% just because we think that's what we should do. So they took 20% there. The other thing is they allow the commercial fishermen to weigh their fish with a gutted weight, where we as recreational fishermen have to weigh ours with a whole weight, and that's about another 15% difference. So it's not pound to pound, and that's one of the things that if we straightened out, the removal of that buffer and the ability for us to count our fish in a gutted weight instead of a whole weight would make a big difference. But I'll finish with this, Mr. Chairman. This is my Florida fishing license. There are approximately 300 people with commercial licenses in to fish for red snapper in the Gulf of Mexico. They don't pay a whole lot more for theirs than I do for mine. The recreational fisherman is worth more to the economy than with regard to red snapper than the commercial guy catching red snapper. Now, again, there's plenty for everybody, and in fact, the excuse to cut us to 10 days, one of the excuses is that there's so many more fish, and the fish are so much bigger now that the recreational guy is just catching his limit faster. Now, you know, that just doesn't make any sense at all. We were promised as rec guys when the species recovered that we would have our season back, and that's what we're asking for.
Thank you very much.